Good evening and welcome to the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with our co-host Gardner,
Howdy.
Phil,
How's it going?
and we're missing somebody.
Yeah, Sean. Sydney was unable to attend today due to a prior commitment, but she will join us again next month.
Yeah, we miss her and we're looking forward to her coming back.
Absolutely.
Big doings happening.
She
Good stuff.
does.
Yep.
Before we get into our guests, we want to talk a little bit about what happened, I think it was 2 weekends ago now.
Yeah.
It was the Merrimack Valley Book Festival that Christopher Golden set up.
Right.
And it was one hell of a great time,
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Who is
200
Christopher
people.
Golden, by the way?
We'll be meeting Christopher Golden, and well, depending on which segment this airs, either this show or the next show.
A very astute question. Yeah, that
Yes.
was great. 200 people attending at the Andover Community Theater. Just fantastic opportunities to meet so many great writers coming from the region and elsewhere. I mean, Rio Yowers came over
From Canada, yeah.
Toronto. Just terrific.
But you
Brian
had-
Keene from
Brian
where's it,
Keene.
Georgia? Sarah Langdon from
Brian
New York
came
City.
from Pennsylvania. John Langan came from upstate New York.
But you had a special part in this too.
Oh, that was awesome! Yes, and it was. Let me see, whose idea was it? I think it was Jack. I think it was Jack's idea, Jack Herringa, to do a live reading of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
And
Hyde.
there were 5 of you reading?
It was great, yeah. I got to read, well, first Brian Keene read, and he did a great job. Then I was next. Then Bracken McLeod was next, an excellent writer. And then John Langan. And Jack was supposed to finish everything off, but we ran out of time. So,
Well, I was there for part of it, and I got to tell you, I was mesmerized. It was a great reading. You did very well.
oh, thanks.
And I hope they do this again next year. So, Chris, I know you're listening. You got to do this again next year. And
Better.
You better, you're right.
Yeah,
We'll
they
all
they
be
actually
down.
had to close down because there were so many people.
It was sold out.
Yeah,
It was sold out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You've heard us mention a couple names, Bracken McLeod, Christopher Golden. Those are just 2 of the 4 celebrities we have for our Halloween show this evening, and the next program, which should be, I think, on Halloween Day.
Yeah.
We've got Chris Golden, Bracken McLeod,
Yep.
John McIlveen, and my favorite horror author of all time, the great James A. Moore.
It's going to be a really packed
It's gonna be a
series
lot of
of
fun.
shows, yes.
So please stay tuned. We'll be right back with the start of our show. We're here with John McIlveen. He may look familiar to you because he's been on the show 3 times. This will make his 4th time, the first in the studio. Yeah, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hello.
you're one of our favorite guests, and we'll keep having you back too if you like.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to.
He's actually been here many times. He's been hiding out
Yes,
in the back with binoculars, night vision going.
Please let me in the
I
studio.
am your conscience.
You know, I was thinking, I was going through some of my books, and you and I are anthology mates in quite a few books.
Yes.
We're both in Wicked Tales.
Yes.
We're both in Epitaphs.
Yes.
And we're both in Eulogies too.
Yeah. Like
From
they say,
Horror Press.
it's who you know, right?
Nancy. And Horror Press with Christopher Jones, Nancy Calanta, and Tony Tremblay as the editors. We were more than happy to have you on, have you included in this, and your story, War, was was great, and we really loved it.
Yes. Don't read it to your mother.
No. You got something for us, Guard.
Yeah. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, this fine gentleman sitting to my right, your left, John McIlveen. Remember, it's not M-A-C, it's M-C-I-L-V-E-E-N.
Wow.
Yes, indeed. I've been researching it. No.
Writing it all wrong.
John and I have known each other for quite a while. And by the way, Historian Wicked Tales is great. If it were published from Dorchester, it would be Wicked Awesome Tales.
Wicked Awesome.
Wicked Awesome Tales, I'm telling you. But he's the author of many short stories, collection of short stories that's out. We'll tell you about that, and a novel that we really want to tell you about. Let me see. The paranormal suspense novel Hannah Ware, to start things off. Short story collection Inflictions, Jerks and Other Tales.
Yes.
From a Perfect Man, which is also compiled in the collection of Inflictions. That is very true. And you got to see the cover for Inflictions. Remember these titles, and please look them up. He is the father of 5 daughters, and I'm really interested. He works at MIT's, is it Lincoln Labs?
Lincoln Labs.
Yeah,
yes.
Lincoln Labs. and sort of an engineering-minded guy, and lives in Haverhill, which we won't hold that against him. He should be up in New Hampshire, but it'll take some time.
I was born in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
You
Hey,
you
I met
traitor.
you in Nashua.
That's right. That's right. You were in Nashua years and years
years ago.
ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he lives in Haverhill with his fiance, and newly ready to get engaged. How long ago did you get engaged?
Oh God, about a month ago.
Congratulations.
Yes, in
That's great.
Provincetown.
Wow. His fiancee, Roberta Colasanti, who is just a terrific woman, and I'm sure you'll be watching this later on. And he has an affinity for black licorice. What are the other little things? Whoopie pies.
Whoopie pies.
And I'm just adding my own little accoutrement, hosting really good movie parties with Chris Golden.
Yes.
So thanks for coming in, buddy.
Yep. Numbamathon.
Yes.
Yes.
Numbamathon.
Yes.
Gonna do an interview portion. Now you ready?
I'm ready.
Great. We've talked in the past about your work, and we're going to go back to it, but I want to start this interview off with the present and the future.
All right.
You've got a new book coming out. It's called Gone North. You're working on it anyway.
I'm working on it. Yes. Yes.
This is a challenge. You said you love challenges. This is a challenge. Your two protagonists are African-American
Sisters.
sisters, women.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the book and how the heck did you were able to put yourself into the minds of two African-American women?
Well, sisters. You'll notice that females are predominant in most of my stories. That has to do with my 5 daughters, and I have 2 sisters myself, and I think now I'm getting a good idea of how they tick, But me not being either African American or female, I thought, what better way to challenge myself? And I love New Orleans, so
It's set in New Orleans.
it's New Orleans and Boston. One sister ends up in Boston, and the other one's down in New Orleans. It's set in 1961, and it deals with these 2 sisters. One ends up going to Boston on, it seems like the deal of a lifetime. So she's gone north, and what happens is things start to fall apart in New Orleans. I won't go too much into detail, but things really start turning bad. So the younger sister, who's 16, her name is Talia, decides that she's got to go and be with her sister, because essentially that's all left to her family core is her
she's got-
sister. Her brother's away in war, getting ready to ship off to Vietnam, and so this is almost like a 2-part story. One follows the older sister, Emma, who's in Boston, and who falls in love and starts a relationship with a white man. And the other part, and this deals a lot with, of course, racial tensions. The tensions were sky high back in the early '60s, and also Talia's choice to hike it north with her 3-legged dog, Bacchus, and the trials she meets along the way. And it's not an easy trip by any means, as you could imagine, a 16-year-old African-American young lady walking north. And
So this is more mainstream. There's not any supernatural elements to it?
not any. There is a murder, but
Okay.
but it's not central to the plot. It is very important in the story, but it's not mainstream at all.
Well,
I mean, it's all mainstream. Sorry.
All the things you've talked about, I look forward to. I look forward to reading
Right.
about. Love New Orleans, love Boston, love hiking, and I'm curious to see what happens. The murder intrigues me. It sounds like it's going to be a fun novel.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I felt I could get into the 2 ladies' minds is when I was quite young. My best friend, he's still a good friend, David Riddick. He was the only African-American family in Hudson, New Hampshire when we were kids. And we spent probably 11 years best friends hanging around together. And even though Hudson wasn't wasn't like, parts of Alabama were and stuff, but there was still a lot of prejudice. And I got into a few tussles myself, being guilty by association. and he's like a brother, and so we got into fights. So I saw a lot of it, but I knew, and I really know now, I didn't see anything. Doing the research of this, what went on is just horrific. It's beyond anything you read in a horror story, and because it's true. It was all true.
True life horrors are the worst.
Oh yeah, and
what people experience and the way that people can act. It's like you can't even grasp it, right?
Right.
Let's concentrate on the present again. Let's pull you back a little bit. Let's talk about Hannaware,
Yes.
which is getting great buzz. The reviews have been fantastic, and congratulations on the success that it's having.
Yeah, and I'd like all the agents and publishers that wouldn't take Hannaware to
To listen, Gone North is coming out, so maybe.
yeah, I'm here.
In Hannaware, there's a special bond between Hannah, her sister, and their mom.
Right.
It's a wonderful bond. And this bond extends through time and even another dimension.
Right.
It gives readers feel-good moments. You sit there when you read these portions, and it's good as a nice reprieve from some of the evil that the men basically are causing. Hannah, her sister, and the other lead in the novel, Debbie. You're the father of 5 daughters, as you just mentioned.
Right.
How difficult was it to write about the abuse that these ladies had, and these young girls and Debbie had in Hannaware?
Yeah, I knew it was a tough going in. I had written years ago a story called Smokey, in which, from a cat's point of view, a little 3-year-old girl is beaten to death by her mother, and so all my antagonists are not male, but it was. You do end up putting your family, your children, your friends into your work, and there are a number of moments when you have to get up and go away, have a drink or whatever, just to kind of get away from the intensity, because yes, you do put your.
When they found Hannah's sister, I won't go into where if you haven't read the book, but that was chilling.
Right.
It was depressing. And disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, just that somebody could do something like
Right,
that.
right.
Even if it's fiction, it still gets to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see why you did get up and walk away a few times.
Yes, and as you said, what happens unfortunately was based on a true happening in I think it was Albuquerque, if I'm not mistaken. But
Well, you talk about your love for the underdog. You've talked about
Right.
it with us in the past, and you've mentioned it basically now when we're going over Hannaware. Your love for this is so evident in your short stories also. How much fun was it to write the epilogue in Hannaware, where Travis really gets what's coming to him?
it was good. It was it's redeeming, definitely redeeming. No, Dean Koontz is a person who he says he always likes darkness to lose in the end. He likes a story to end with a happy ending, and I understand it in there. And it's not a happy ending, because there are a number of things that, of course, someone would have to deal with in their lives after that. But it was good. What I wanted to do to Travis could have gone a lot worse, but I had to throttle back a little. But I had fun with it.
I'm sure
Yeah,
you did,
yeah.
and that's why I was asking. Only because what Travis did throughout the book was just absolutely terrible.
Yes.
And it was kind of, you don't want to smile because what happened to him in the end, it's not. It's pretty horrific in itself, but still, he got what was coming to him.
Right.
He got his due. I'm going to ask one more question before I turn it over to Gardner,
sure.
because he's got a question. You're a very prolific story writer. I loved inflictions, and every story in that was right on, was spot on.
Thank
They
you.
were really enjoyable. And you've got the collections from Crossroad as well as Nikon.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples of short stories from other writers that you may have loved, or the writers themselves?
Oh my God, there are so many. Pretty much, Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson were my, and Theodore Sturgeon. Those, I think, are the gods of the short story. Modern, I like a lot of people. Margaret Atwood has some great short stories. Kelly Link, who's Massachusetts. Is she Massachusetts anymore? I'm not sure, but she actually goes above and beyond. She's really takes a new view. You know, she's really good.
We got time for one more question, guys.
Yeah, I'm intrigued, John. Either in the short story genre or the short story format or the long story format. As a guy who knows you personally, and you know, you're one of these guys who's always nice, always friendly, and when you pull the veil off of what life can be like for people, I'm just wondering, as you plot something out, as you're working on the story ideas, and it might not be something that is consistent with how you work, it might be different in every instance, but do you find that you are on, for example, with a novel, do you have the ending first and then work towards that, or multiple things that you know are going to happen to the characters as you go through these things? There could be different things. And short stories as well. Is it just a concept where you say, okay, I'm intrigued by this, I'm going to work on this? Or do you say, no, I know the ending, I know what I want to do here, and I'm going to reverse engineer it and get to the things that I need to have to make that happen?
You have to answer that in 1 minute.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's some of my stories I have. I'll be working in my house, you know, putting nail in. Boom! The whole story just pops up in my head, and I'll say, some stories just start with the title, and I don't know where I'm going to go with that. I say, wow, that'd make a great sounding title for a story, and then I'd work off there. Hannaware was a lot of it came into being as I wrote, you know, and it started out as a short story, and Chris Golden said, this could make a great novel. And so I just went, boom, and I said, okay, I'm doing it. And so, it just bloomed.
And
It's funny.
Sorry, Tony.
Oh, no, it's funny how a phrase, a story, something can just spur you on to write.
Right.
I was listening to something on the radio today about Shirley Jackson.
Yes, I was listening to that too.
Well, when they mentioned this one phrase, a cup full of blue stars.
Yeah.
I heard the phrase and a story popped into my head.
Yeah.
Just from hearing that phrase. So I had to run home and write down the particulars.
And she
and
had
get
some
to
good
it.
short stories.
Oh man, yeah, and it's
Oh, the
interesting.
lottery
that-
is
oh,
awesome.
it's such a perfect time to mention Shirley Jackson. Talk about Shirley Jackson. They just released some in a new collection of her stories.
Really?
That they found.
Unpublished.
Yeah,
I didn't know
for
that.
kids.
Yes,
Yeah.
unpublished
Yeah,
stories.
and you know
I'll
sometimes
be
that's a
buying it.
positive, sometimes it's a negative,
Yeah.
but it seems like it's a positive in
In
this
this case, it does.
Yeah.
We got to get you to read.
Yeah,
right.
let's hear it. We'll call you Shirley
right.
McIlveen.
Yeah, well, this is from 111 pages in on my, I'm doing the final edits on Gone North.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Right now it's 700 and some odd pages of manuscript, but I may have to thin it out a bit. But in the story, as I said, bad things happen. This takes place when the youngest sister, Talia, is going in to see her father in the hospital. Okay, it takes place in the lower Ninth Ward, New Orleans, and the chapter's called "It's Always Worse at Night." And my quote here is called "The darker the night, the brighter the light," by Nash Rambler, who is actually a character in this book.
Oh, okay.
It's a little fun I was having. Charity Hospital, set on the corner of Tulane Avenue and LaSalle Street, loomed over me. It was a behemoth, a 20-story cement pterodactyl with huge splayed white wings. It looked more a fortress than a hospital. I stood paralyzed on the front walkway, watching billowy, ethereal clouds drift behind the monstrosity. I waited for it to fall on me, to pulverize me. I wished it would. Anything to take me away from a world that had become so wrong and so cruel. Every surface seemed inflamed with a sun-painted nimbus that was somehow painfully bright, yet seemed arctic, cold and dreamlike. I felt as if I was seeing through someone else's eyes into an illusory landscape. Mr. Mills held my left hand and Haney held my right. They were my buttresses as we forged our way forward. Officer Gregory led us through the doorway and into another level of hell. Haney gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and we entered the belly of the monster. People glided silently by us like ghosts of doctors, nurses, and visitors, all offering compassionate and knowing glances before averting their eyes. None of them knew who I was, yet they did. Everyone recognizes the face of anguish. They all know the eyes of the desperate, those of us who have had the safety net yanked out from beneath us. They see us grasping and flailing, and they're aware of the look in our eyes, the hopelessness that comes with knowing that there is no salvation and there are no heroes. All they can do is look on, sympathetic, horrified, susceptible, and maybe somehow enthralled by the hopeless and helpless humans grasping desperately for any thread of optimism. They avert their eyes as we fall, and maybe some fall with us. I guess Officer Gregory assumed it would somehow comfort me when he said Mama was fortunate, the way she had died instantly upon impact. Lucky her. Also among the lucky were an elderly man who owned a candle shop in the quarter, and the mother of the toddler, all winners in the blind drunk sudden death lottery. Daddy and the toddler chose to hang on, their mortality suspended due to their sizes, Daddy's excess of it and the baby's lack of it. The doctors of Charity Hospital felt both Daddy and the baby were so busted up they couldn't possibly carry through the night. It was a matter of waiting for the inevitable and keeping them in medicated oblivion until then. The irony of the whole incident was as evident as their deaths. Mama, Daddy, and all but one of their victims were on their way to protest the proposed construction of the Interstate I-10 elevated expressway. It was a project that many felt would alter the life in our city and be devastating to its residential areas and small businesses, especially those along the beautiful Oak Line, Claiborne Avenue, and Treme. However, and here's the irony, the proposed project would eliminate much of the commercial traffic on the same street that had claimed their lives. Funny, huh? When I entered the ICU room, Daddy was lying on the hospital bed. He didn't look good. He didn't look ready for dying, but he didn't look ready for dying to me. He wasn't wearing many bandages except for his right leg and arm and one tightly wrapped around the top of his head. His eyes, however, were a grisly sight. They were so thickly swollen and so deeply bruised that they were sealed tight and looked as if plums were pressed into his eye sockets.
Wow.
Yeah, very descriptive. Very
That was
accurate,
awesome. And the way that you got the timing on the creation of the I-10
Yeah.
and set, weave that in to the effect that would have on the very road where ironically that was awesome. That was awesome.
I think I did about 3 times as much research for this as I did writing because I get just buried in the research. It's the history of it, just of, the Liberty Riders and, everything that went on there is,
It's worth it.
you
It
become
paid
a
off.
brother.
It's
did
worth
it
it.
ever.
That was awesome. That was
One
awesome.
last thing before we
Yes.
say goodbye. What's your favorite horror movie?
Favorite horror movie? Oh my God. Probably
This is
I'm
from a
thinking
guy that shows horror movies.
I just went blank on the name. John Carpenter up in the
Oh, The Thing.
Thank you.
Oh, that
Yes,
was a
yes,
great one,
I
yeah.
love that.
That was such a good one.
Yeah, especially for its time though. When that came out, it was a lot of fun.
Lovecraft.
Yeah, I can't believe I went blank on the name of that. Huh?
Thanks,
Thank
John. It was great seeing you, and we hope to have you here 4 more times.
I'll come back.
All right.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll have to talk about short stories sometime. We'll get everybody to come in. That'll be really fun.
I had half the questions I never even got a chance to ask.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you very much.
And we got to remember, don't forget the title of the new novel,
Gone North.
Gone
North, coming out hopefully. When do you think?
I don't know yet. Don't know. Yet. I'm
Okay.
doing
He's
the
got some
final
editing
edits.
to do for
All right.
people
I'm
first,
finishing
okay?
the final edits right now, and the 3rd rewrite. It was almost 1,000 pages.
Oh,
so.
jeez. Thank you very much, and please stay tuned. We'll be right back with our next interview. We're sitting here with the acclaimed writer, Bracken McLeod. I'm going to read Bracken's bio, and then from there we're going to go to Phil, and you're going to ask him some questions. So, you all set?
All set. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, we more than happy to have you on. It's a pleasure. It really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bracken McLeod has worked as a martial arts teacher, a university philosophy instructor. He's worked for a children's nonprofit and as a criminal and civil trial attorney. His short fiction has appeared in various magazines and anthologies, including Shotgun Honey, Lamplight, Locked and Loaded, Both Barrels, Volume 3, Ominous Realities, The Big Adios, Femme Fatale, Erotic Tales of Dangerous Women, Shock Totem Magazine, and
Eulogies 3.
3.
Available at all fine purveyors of books.
Absolutely. Welcome again to the show.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Actually, can I ask something else about your bio?
Sure.
Are you originally born and raised in New England?
I'm originally from Western Mass, but I've lived all over. When I was a young kid, we moved out west. We moved to California. I've lived in Idaho and Colorado, and I've lived all over the country. So, but my roots are in New England.
You know, I did forget to mention that he's also the author of the novel, which is very important, Mountain Home, and a novella titled White Night. His new novel, Stranded, is coming soon from Tor Forge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's going to be Tor. Tor Forge is the company, but it's going to be a Tor book. That should be out in 2016.
Well, I learned about it tonight, and I am so excited to hear about this, and I can't wait to read it.
Great.
As I did your other two books.
Yeah.
I love Mountain Home and I love White Night.
Thank you.
And actually, our first question is about those books, as a matter of fact. So, excellent segue there, Tony. So let's get into some of the questions here. And
Great.
first one, have them all written down here, so no one will screw up. Bracken, I first met you a few years ago. I think it was the very first AnthoCon, and since then, a lot has changed. Not only have you had numerous published titles in various anthologies, including the book that you and Tony are in.
I could have shortened that bio a little, couldn't I?
Actually, I took a lot out. I don't know if you noticed.
However, you have a novel entitled Mountain Home, and then you have the novella entitled White Night.
White Night.
And then you have Stranded, which is coming out. Tell us all about these three books and the positive feedback that you've heard.
Mountain Home and White Night are both, as you can tell, a little smaller books. Mountain Home is the sort of the action-based plot is about a mass shooting that occurs in a diner, sort of thing that we see a lot on the news. And the heart of the book is about the disparate people inside the diner who have to work together to survive, even though they all have different interests. What I think is the real soul of the book, though, is are two female characters who are reflecting each other, and they're both at a point in their lives where they're at a crossroads where they have to pick a path in life that will, that will save them. And the problem for each one of them is that one of those paths might hurt a lot of people to take them. So it's really a moral dilemma for each one of these people who are versions of each other. White Night, on the other hand, is sort of a more straight-up crime thriller. It's about a young prosecuting attorney who makes a promise that he can't keep. He knows he can't keep it when he makes it. But trying to keep that promise almost ruins his life and takes everything he loves away from him. And the first part of the book, it's a work of fiction, but the first part of the book was partially informed by my prior career as an attorney.
Awful books, both of them. They were.
Yeah, no, they're just terrible, unreadable.
No.
I know what you meant. My writing style is hard, and they're not sort of easy, lighthearted, sort of romps through characters who aren't having a hard time. They're about people at the worst moments in their lives, and all of my books kind of have the same theme, which is this idea of ordinary people in extraordinarily bad circumstances and how they either rise to that occasion or fail to rise, and examining those situations. The new book, Stranded, which is coming out from Tor in 2016, is a departure. It's my first attempt at a supernatural novel, and the response to it so far from people who've been able to read it early has been really good. So, hopefully it's a success. It's about a group of merchant seamen in the Arctic Ocean who become what they call beset. They become trapped in the ice in the ocean, and it's about them trying to survive being trapped. And the theme of the book, like Mountain Home's theme, is that these people have to confront the people that they are, as well as the people they might have been had things gone just a little bit differently in their lives, and reconcile those two, those two parts of themselves. So, it's an action-based thriller, but it's also, very contemplative in a way. So I hope people like it.
If I can interject about that, where in the Arctic, like what country, like is it near?
Well,
and
it's-
also, are the characters all Americans, or is it international?
It's an American cast on an American boat. It's the kind of ship it is called a platform supply vessel, and what it is the kind of ship that resupplies oil drilling platforms. So they're sailing into the Chukchi Sea, which is just a little bit sort of northeast or northwest of Alaska. So it's around the Alaska area, but when the fog rolls in and the ice takes the ship, no one's quite sure where they are.
Oh, interesting. Super
I
nice.
love the premise.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, actually. Yeah. Well, let's go to the next question I have here, and since we were talking about different genres and so forth, you write not just horror fiction and scary stories, but I've noticed you have a love for crime and noir, similar to Tony does. What is it about that genre that interests you?
It's like I said earlier with the the books all sort of having similar themes about ordinary people in extraordinarily bad circumstances, and I think that's the big overlap between crime fiction and horror fiction, is that they both depict people who are struggling against forces that are larger than themselves. And in crime fiction, a lot of the time it's their own actions, things that they've done that have gotten away from themselves, that they've let get away from themselves, and how to survive the events they've set in motion. Where in horror fiction, often that those bad events are set in motion externally, the ancient evil that awakes or whatever. But even my horror fiction, for the most part, is what I call secular horror, which is reality-based. It's more of a Jack Ketchum style than a supernatural style. So even then, these are events that people have set into motion for themselves, as opposed to the ancient evil awakening in the old burial ground that was plowed over or something like that. I like those stories, but I'm not necessarily the person to write them, because when I try, it doesn't seem as convincing to me as when I do straight up sort of reality-based pieces.
Now, you kind of mentioned it in your answer to that question, but many times folks will say crime and noir fiction is itself defined as part of the genre thriller or mystery. And yet many horror books and movies are called mysteries or thrillers, such as The Silence of the Lambs. Some folks say that you can combine the two as one. Do you believe the two are in many ways alike?
Well, I think that they share a lot of the same sort of goals, which is to explore darkness, whether it's in the human character or whether it's outside of people, and how they react to it. The Silence of the Lambs is a great example, because I always think of Silence of the Lambs and the book that Thomas Harris wrote before it, Red Dragon, as horror novels, even though there's nothing supernatural about them. They're about killers, but they're definitely horrific in a sense that there are people in the world who are that terrible, and both of those books are based on real life villains. I mean, Ed Gein was an inspiration for Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. So I think of it as a horror novel, but it's marketed as a thriller because I think, to a large degree, because horror is kind of a dirty word in the business, which is to say that if you ask somebody if they like horror, they'll say, "Oh no, I don't like that scary stuff." And then you ask them what they read, and they'll list you off a half dozen horror novels that have been sort of repackaged as thrillers, and that's fine. I mean, genre labels are useful to the degree I think they direct readers toward what they're looking for. But I don't necessarily think that if you slap a label on a book, it's particularly helpful beyond the point of purchase.
When I think of noir, I usually think there's a more definitive emphasis on character and atmosphere than horror. Not to say that horror, you don't concentrate on characters or atmosphere, but noir, it just seems to be out front.
Yeah.
It's more important sometimes than the action.
Well, noir is, noir as a genre, I think, is about the downward spiral of the protagonist. I used to say I had it's sort of flipped. It's a joke, but I had a three-step rule for writing noir. The main character has to get, what I would say, he has to get laid, he has to get betrayed, and he has to get shot somewhere in the book. But the idea is that it's his downward spiral. He starts out with things being probably pretty bad, because most of them start with often they start with a cliche, which is this guy wakes up hungover in some dingy motel room, he doesn't know where he is, and then things go bad. But he starts off with his normal life, and then someone enters his life, and it just kind of goes down from there. And I think the difference between popular horror, and noir fiction is that at the end of a lot of popular horror, there's a redemption at the end. The protagonist is able to somehow rescue their life and return the world to the status quo. Where at the end of a lot of noir, things just end badly.
Yeah.
They end up for those people in an irretrievable state of despoilment.
So no deliverance.
Well, more like no deliverance at the end of the story, or at least very little of it. Things change, and the thing about noir fiction that really appeals to me is a lot of the time the violence in it has consequences, and this is one of the things that I'm most dedicated to in my own work, is that violence should have consequences. If someone gets hurt or attacked or abused in a book, that should last. It should last at least throughout the rest of the book and have some sort of influence on the end of it. And if you're writing a series, it should be in the next book too, because the traumas that we suffer don't go away. I mean, they scar over, and they hurt for a long time. So, when you see a book about someone who just goes through absolute hell, and they descend to the deepest pits of existence and emerge burned and shot and cut and scared and all of these things, and in the very next book it's like nothing ever happened, I feel a little cheated, because
It's unreal.
the next book should be an exploration of the consequences of violence.
I'm going to jump in here, Phil, because
Sure.
I have a question which I think is a good follow-up to your answer to that last question from Phil. I've known you for a while. In fact, many people on Facebook know you very well. Just by your writings, by your comments, your posts. They don't even have to read your books.
Am I looking for trouble?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
You're a passionate man.
Yeah.
It comes across, and we love it. Whether it comes to religion, politics, racism, gun control, you take a position that comes down on the side of the good of the common man, or the abused. We see it in your fiction. You mentioned White Knight with the prosecutor. We see The Mountain Home, where the abused woman, Joni, in that case, can only take so much before she reacts. She takes drastic measures. What drives Bracken McLeod? What makes you the way you are?
Oh, well, it's that's how much time do we have in this show?
We got another 5 minutes.
Excellent. When I was younger, I felt a calling. And people talk about this in a religious sense. They feel a calling to serve, and I felt a calling to serve, but in a civil sense. I wanted to be an attorney because I thought that was a way to make people's lives better, and that was a way to try and fix problems that exist in the world that aren't getting fixed. And the rude awakening I had, what I learned was that instead of strapping on armor and slaying dragons as an attorney, really what you do is you're just a vassal on the field, moving
The machine.
Yeah, moving treasure from one king's castle to another, and it was a disappointment. And what I try to do in my book is, in my books or the short stories that I write or anything, is sort of portray a feeling of this can be overcome, even if it's not overcome. The idea that there's a struggle and that you can fight against it. Mm-hmm. I had an experience when I was 17. I picked up a book by a writer named Andrew Vax. The book was called Strega. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever had, reading this book was the first time in my life I ever had an idea that there was anyone out in the world who cared about my pain and what I had gone through as a young person. And I realized, I think at that moment, that fiction can be really
Cathartic.
powerful,
Yeah.
and it can be enabling for that one person who reads a book and goes, he gets it, he knows what I've been through, and he believes I can get through
Yep.
this.
Yeah.
And that's ideally what I want. If there's one person in the world who reads this book and takes away that experience that I had from Strega, I mean, it was a success. You know, you can pick up a hammer, and this is the thing about the law practice. You can pick up a hammer and you can smash at the roots of a mountain your entire life, and you won't tear down the mountain. But if you can inspire one person to pick up the hammer when you fall and keep beating at it, eventually the mountain will crumble, and that'll make what you did worthwhile.
It's a great analogy. Yeah.
Well, I do have one more question. Since you write in many genres and in many ways combine them together, how do you balance the various genres and make your tales distinct from other contemporary writers?
You know, I mean, I guess it comes in the idea that that what I do is I do try to bridge sort of this stratoline or the overlapping, you know, circles between horror and crime writing, and so a little bit of it bleeds into each, which is what I hope makes it a little bit unique. You know, Mountain Home. When I say Mountain Home is a horror novel, I get pushback. Because people tell me it's a thriller, it's a crime novel or whatever, but it's not a horror novel because there's no, you know, sort of supernatural beast in it. But if I called Mountain Home a crime novel, I think I'd get the same amount of pushback because it's really focused on the emotional states of the people. And really what I try to do to make my stuff stand out is to convey honest emotional experience in the books. And another one of my huge influences, I mentioned Andrew Vax, but the other one of my major influences is Jack Ketchum. And people talk about certain of his books and how hard they are to read and how, you know, but they're amazing. And what makes them amazing is his devotion to character and his devotion to the emotional truth of whatever's happening. And you take a book like The Girl Next Door, which a lot of people think is his magnum opus, like the best book he's written. And you look at it, and it's not just a story about a girl being tortured. It's a story really about a witness to that and his powerlessness in the face of evil, and how badly he wants to stop it or to not be a participant in it, and how he can get swept away in his struggle. And I think that's the moral core of the book. And that's what elevates it from being...
It's almost like a literary fiction.
Yeah, it is, but you know, it's very firmly in genre, but it's very literary, and so I guess, you know, that's the short version of what I'm doing, is that I'm trying to inject emotional content and emotional truth to...
You're very successful.
To the you know, to the action.
You're very successful. Everything I've read, it's worked.
Well, thank you.
Well, and it's a thriller, horror, noir, and literary all together.
And yeah, kind of all jammed together, and hopefully it works for a couple of people.
You got something to read for us.
Yeah, I figured I'd read a little bit of Mountain Home,
Please do.
if,
Fantastic.
if you don't mind.
I don't at all.
I'm old. I'll give you a little setup. Like I had said earlier, Mountain Home starts with a shooting. It's set in a diner where a person has started shooting through the windows, a sniper outside, and started killing people. And the hostess who works in the restaurant, Lynn, is sort of the unwilling leader of the group of survivors in the middle of the siege. And for the first time in, well, almost 100 pages, she's gotten a moment to herself instead of being stuck in this crowd of people who are fighting against her, and this is what happens. Dressing in her own clothes gave Lynn the feeling that she'd finally regained a semblance of control over her life, even if it was an illusion. In reality, she was still trapped in the diner. Changing her clothes in the bathroom gave her the same amount of control over her life as a condemned prisoner ordering his last meal. It wouldn't make any difference how she looked when the bullet that took her life finally found her. She looked at the green peasant frock that hung loosely over skinny jeans, emphasizing a little too well how skinny she really was. She pulled on her boots and finally buckled the wide belt around her waist. This is who I am. Carefully sliding the gun into her belt, she looked into the mirror and said, "This is who I've become." Washing her face wasn't as painful as seeing what Bo had done to her once narrow, straight nose. She scrubbed at the skin under her eyes until she realized that they were black from bruising, not filth. She parted her fingers and looked at the gun in her belt, wondering whether she'd feel a bullet rip through her skull before her brains gave out and she could just go to sleep. She doubted there would be any difference if the bullet came from Joni's gun or from her own. Leaning against the sink, trying to banish the thought of calling it right there in the bathroom, an image of the void, its blackness, its emptiness, its nothing, filled her mind with promises of no more pain, no more fear, just nothing. Her vision blurred as tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks, and she caressed the gun butt. That's it. Take it. An unfamiliar voice in her head told her. She wiped her tears and looked into the mirror at the high, narrow window over her shoulder. The beast's black eyes stared back through. Its breath fogged the glass. It spoke. Take the gun and end it. Come be with me and free everyone else. Why punish all these people for your failure? My failure. I didn't start this. It's not my fault. Everything that's happened today is your fault, the beast said. You summoned me to free yourself, to escape this life of banality and want. So be free. Be nothing. It is what you are already. I'm something. I'm me. Nothing. The beast glared through the window. Lynn squinted shut, her eyes pressing her palms against them, but the image of the monster wouldn't go away. It remained, black eyes leering, accusing her of being everything she was, alone, inert, and afraid to free herself. She pulled the pistol out of her waistband and spun around, aiming at the window, aiming at nothing but sunlight and trees on the other side of the glass. Her own voice echoed in her head, accusing her of not only being weak, but now crazy. It was one thing to daydream about life being a fantasy tale. It was something else entirely to populate that life with monsters creeping in the woods, staring back from the mirror. She took her sketchbook out of her messenger bag and held it like a counterweight against the gun in her other hand. The scale naturally tipped in favor of the gun. She sat down solidly on the closed lid of the toilet and wept softly, holding the cool barrel of the gun flat against her forehead. The blast outside shook the window above the toilet, and she screamed. And then she screamed some more. She screamed until she was hoarse. And then she breathed. Still alive. I'm still alive. She thought of the monster at the window. I'm alive, and you can't have me. Abandoning her uniform in a pink and stained red pile on the floor, she got up, grabbed her bag, and walked out to see who was left.
Very powerful stuff. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed Mountain Home and Lynn and Joni and two very powerful, strong women. Right on.
Thank you very much.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Bracken, for joining us, and hopefully we'll be back with you again soon.
It was a pleasure, and I'll come back anytime you want me.
Well, we want you. We hope you enjoyed tonight's program. That was one hell of a great show, wasn't it?
A lot of talents in those people. There.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely hope people will look up their books, check them out, see where they're appearing live, too.
Absolutely.
All talented, great people.
Not only that, we got 2 more interviews next week.
Yeah.
Can't wait for those, too. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.